An antiquated observatory, long abandoned, was acquired for its salvageable parts. Within its dusty confines, a monumental discovery was made, a lost space artifact, concealed for decades, which promised to rewrite astronomical history. Dr. Vivian Holt wasn't looking for history. She was looking for copper wire and optical glass. As the lead technical director for the Mojave Historical Society, she spearheaded the acquisition of the defunct Mount Zenith Observatory. Built in the early 1960s at the height of the space race, the observatory was abandoned in the 80s due to light pollution and budget cuts. The Society's intent was purely salvage. Recover the massive main telescope mount and sell the rare, high-grade optical lens to fund smaller preservation projects. The facility was a wreck. Dust, cobwebs, and decades of neglect coated everything. The massive dome, a skeleton of rusted metal, only rotated with a terrifying groan. The eerie acquisition. Hook. Start with a cinematic pan across a desolate, decaying observatory, emphasizing its forgotten grandeur. Backstory. Briefly explain how a historical society or private buyer acquired the observatory, focusing on its intended purpose, salvage, historical preservation. Vivian and her team began the initial survey, fighting against the suffocating silence. The main observation floor was dominated by the massive equatorial mount, a steel behemoth, designed to hold a telescope the size of a cannon. But the telescope tube itself was missing, a common issue in salvage, leaving only the heavy, precise counterweights. While checking the foundation for structural integrity, Vivian noticed an anomaly in the concrete floor beneath the main control panel. A subtle, circular seam, meticulously hidden by a layer of matching sealant and dust. It was perfectly placed, suggesting a secondary, unauthorized structure. This wasn't a utility access point, it was a concealed vault. The team spent hours carefully chipping away the concrete around the seam. Using heavy jacks, they managed to pry open the circular hatch. The air that rushed out was cold, dry, and smelled intensely of ozone and preserved synthetic material, a scent that had no business being in a 1960s structure. Vivian shone her powerful light down. The space was a deep, concrete silo, perfectly sealed and climate-controlled. And suspended within the silo, protected by shock-mounted cables, was a single metallic object, a roughly spherical structure with complex, fused metallic seams, clearly subjected to immense heat and pressure. It was not a piece of a telescope. It was clearly extraterrestrial debris, an artifact from beyond Earth's atmosphere. Mystery Hook. Imagine an old, abandoned observatory, gathering dust for decades. What if within its forgotten walls, we stumbled upon something that wasn't supposed to exist? Something that could completely rewrite our understanding of the universe and our place in it. The discovery was monumental, a lost space artifact, concealed for decades, promising to rewrite astronomical history. Hold on right there. Vivian just found a perfectly preserved extraterrestrial artifact, sealed beneath a forgotten observatory. The scientific implications are massive. You need to see what this object reveals about the cosmos. Hit that subscribe button now and give this video a like. We need your help to fund the research to unlock this galactic secret. Comment below. Is this space debris or something much more valuable? Let's dive into the vault. Extracting the artifact was a high-risk operation. The object was heavy, dense, and potentially volatile. Using the dome's original hoist system, Vivian and her team carefully lifted the sphere out of the silo. Once exposed to the light, the artifact was even more astounding. Roughly the size of a basketball, its metallic surface was scarred by immense atmospheric reentry heat, but was clearly a manufactured object. The first major challenge was identification. The object bore no recognizable markings. The metallic composition was tested by a portable spectrometer, yielding shocking results. The primary component was a non-ferrous alloy, but it contained isotopes of elements not known to naturally occur on Earth, or at least not in this specific combination and concentration. It was literally composed of impossible metal. Vivian realized the true history of the observatory was a lie. It wasn't abandoned due to budget cuts. It was likely shut down to conceal this artifact. She located the observatory's original logbooks, stored behind a false wall in the director's office. The final log entries, dated 1982, detailed frantic activity, including non-standard equipment deliveries, covert military personnel on site, and cryptic references to Project Chimera. The final entry simply read, "Chimera secured. Orbit stabilized." The silence begins. Vivian consulted her external expert, Dr. Eris Thorne, an astrophysicist specializing in orbital mechanics. Dr. Thorne was stunned. He cross-referenced the log with declassified intelligence data. Project Chimera was a top-secret U.S. program in the late Cold War, attempting to retrieve a Soviet deep space probe that had suffered a critical failure and re-entered the atmosphere over the Pacific. The probe was believed to have carried highly sensitive, proprietary space propulsion data. The project was officially listed as an utter failure. The sphere was not debris. It was the core data module of the lost Soviet probe, containing research potentially decades ahead of Western technology. The unique alloy was likely an advanced radiation shield. The observatory had been the secret site of the successful, yet never acknowledged, retrieval and subsequent burial of the Soviet prize. The object was a piece of space history and a potential technological goldmine. Vivian had found the truth behind a decades-old cover-up. Vivian and Dr. Thorne worked in secrecy to bypass the core module's advanced shielding. They realized the object wasn't just physical data storage. It was a complex system designed to survive cosmic radiation and reentry. They used a low-power particle accelerator to trace the internal structure, revealing a crystalline memory bank deep within the metallic core, the data storage unit. The data was encrypted with a bespoke Soviet-era cipher, far beyond the capabilities of standard decryption software. However, the external metallic shell provided the key. Using the composition data, Dr. Thorne identified a minute seam in the metal that was not fused by heat, but sealed by a unique thermosensitive polymer, a compound known to have been developed by the chief Soviet engineer on the probe project. Working on the theory that the Soviet engineer wanted the data recovered by someone he trusted, Vivian realized the lock was not a password, but a physical sequence tied to the dome's original observatory operations. She matched the molecular structure of the polymer to the cooling fluid used in the main equatorial mount's precision bearings, the very equipment salvaged from the dome. Back at the dome, Vivian used the exact sequence of movements of the main telescope axis, as recorded in the final 1982 log entry, on the salvage mount. The motion triggered a low-frequency sonic pulse. She brought the core module to the exact coordinate of the dome's final lock point. The pulse successfully initiated the decryption sequence on the module. The core module instantly began transmitting data via a localized, coded burst. The data wasn't just propulsion plans. It was a complete manifest of a Soviet deep space colonization strategy, plans proving they were years ahead of Western estimates for establishing permanent off-world bases. The value of this intelligence was incalculable. However, the transmission also contained a final, chilling message from the Soviet engineer, a warning that the retrieval was not just hidden from the U.S. government, but hidden from the KGB. The U.S. military team that retrieved the probe in 1982, Project Chimera, was corrupted, intending to sell the colonization data to a third-party consortium, the Scythe. The observatory director, realizing the betrayal, had faked the Chimera team's success, buried the core module, and dismantled the observatory to cover the truth. The astronomer was a double agent who saved humanity's future from profiteers. The revelation of the colonization data and the internal U.S. corruption led to an immediate, top-tier investigation led by the Department of Justice and NASA. The discovery of the core module and the engineered suppression of the data solved a decades-old intelligence cold case. The data was authenticated as genuine and crucial to modern space development. The Historical Society's intended purpose, salvage, was completely superseded. The Mount Zenith Observatory was declared a National Scientific Heritage Site, its foundation permanently preserved, recognizing its role as the vault that protected critical space intelligence. Vivian's integrity in reporting the find and securing the data was pivotal. NASA and the DOJ determined that the value of the intel, which saved the U.S. billions in research and provided strategic advantage in modern space development, was enormous. Under specialized national security and scientific discovery laws, Vivian was entitled to a massive reward. The final compensation package, consolidated from the avoided research costs and the strategic value of the colonization data, totaled an incredible $75 million. Vivian used the funds to establish the Zenith Protocol Foundation, dedicated to supporting independent astronomy and space archaeology. The original dome structure was fully restored and fitted with modern optical equipment, returning it to active service exactly 40 years after its planned closure. The core module itself, the impossible metal sphere, was placed on permanent loan to the Smithsonian's National Air and Space Museum, displayed as a symbol of Cold War sacrifice and scientific truth. The story of the astronomer's vault proves that the greatest secrets are often hidden in plain sight, protected by dust and silence. For Dr. Vivian Holt, the physicist, the ultimate prize wasn't the copper or glass she sought, but the chance to retrieve a forgotten piece of our cosmic future. If you want to uncover more stories of unimaginable historical finds, make sure you hit that subscribe button now and join us for the next great excavation.